What happened to one of football's biggest clubs? With an unrivalled history, including an era of dominance in the 90s and noughties under Sir Alex Ferguson, who set the standard for success.
Bruce! Yes! Unbelievable!
Into Sheringham, and Solskjaer won it! Manchester United are the champions of Europe again.
United became the team that everyone recognised, admired and feared. Old Trafford earned its nickname the Theatre of Dreams as a stadium for unforgettable moments and a fan base unlike any other. So where did it all go wrong? A takeover brought on debt and ownership issues began to overshadow the club's identity, with leaders prioritising profits over progress. Poor recruitment, questionable financial choices and constant managerial changes left United adrift from the success they once commanded. Owners collected dividends while the team's performances steadily declined, falling short of Premier League and Champions League contention. The club that once set the standard now seemed lost, burdened by decisions that took them further from the legacy they worked so hard to build.
The embedded failure over a 10-year period and where the club are currently at has to come back to the ownership.
In this 8th episode of How Not to Run a Football Club, we unravel the story of the decline of Manchester United under the ownership of the Glazers.
The Glazers, they don't care about the club.
If you follow football, then you pretty much already know the history of Manchester United's success under Sir Alex Ferguson. Alex Ferguson became manager in 1986 and led an unparalleled spell of dominance in the English League up until his retirement in 2013. Under the manager, Manchester United won 38 trophies, including 13 Premier League titles, 2 Champions Leagues and 5 FA Cups. In the 98-99 season, the club secured the first treble in English football history by winning the Premier League, the FA Cup and the Champions League all in that one season. And with all of this, Manchester United became renowned for its youth team programme, which has generated many notable homegrown players, and the famous class of '92, who later went on to become integral players in the squad. The club has also lured some of the world's best players in a number of major transfer signings over the years, such as Wayne Rooney, Rio Ferdinand, Andy Cole, Eric Cantona, and the GOAT Cristiano Ronaldo. Though the warning signs of Man United's downfall can be traced back to when they were still dominating English football under the management of Alex Ferguson as the reign of the Glazers began. In 2003, Malcolm Glazer, a Florida-based businessman who owned Super Bowl champions the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, spent around £9 million to buy a 2.9% stake in the club. Glazer had made the purchase through a holding company called Red Football, and by the end of 2003, Glazer increased his shareholding to around 15%. At the time, a power struggle erupted between the club's manager Alex Ferguson and his horse racing partners, John McNair and JP McManus, who had gradually become the largest shareholders through their company Cubic Expression. They disputed around the ownership of a racing horse called the Rock of Gibraltar. McNair and McManus attempted to have Ferguson removed from his position as manager, and the board responded by approaching investors to attempt to reduce the Irishman's influence. In February 2005, over 400 Manchester United fans held a protest at Old Trafford against a potential Glazer takeover, once they realised that the level of debt that the club would have to take on after being debt-free for so many years. However, this didn't stop Glazer, who went on to acquire the 28.7% stake in May 2005, pushing his own shares up to around 57%, well over the 30% threshold that would force him to launch a takeover bid. Just days after the takeover, the Glazers controlled 75% of United's shares, enough to delist the club from the London Stock Exchange for the first time in 14 years. Fans were already worried, and at the 2005 FA Cup final against Arsenal, United supporters openly protested the takeover. So the idea that fan frustration with the Glazers began only after 2013, when the trophies became less frequent, isn't true at all. Within a month, the Glazers' ownership reached 98% through their Red Football parent company, forcing out the remaining shareholders. The final purchase price? Almost £800 million. By the 7th of June, Malcolm Glazer's sons, Avram, Joel and Brian, had joined Man United's board as non-executive directors. The deal was hugely unpopular, because it was financed primarily through loans secured against the club's assets. The nature of that £800 million takeover, known as a leveraged buyout, loaded United with a debt of £525 million. And just like that, the club was in debt for the first time since 1931. The banks had their reservations too, along with the fans. According to football finance expert Kieran Maguire, they were quite wary of the Glazers, so were charging very high interest rates of up to 14.25%. The Glazer family's first visit to Old Trafford ended in violent scenes in June 2005, as police clashed with hundreds of United supporters who opposed the club's new ownership. Joel, Avram and Brian Glazer had to be smuggled down the players' tunnel and out of the stadium in a police van for their own safety. The vice chairman of Manchester United Supporters Trust, Sean Bones, declared that the Glazer family are the enemies of Manchester United. Straight from the start, it was clear that fans weren't on board with the Glazers. But despite the anger off the pitch, it wasn't all doom and gloom in the early years of the Glazers' reign on the pitch. Despite initial fears that the debt incurred in buying United could lead to insolvency, the club continued to thrive. A lucrative new shirt sponsorship deal signed in April 2006 with AIG, an American company that had a large stake in a hedge fund that helped fund the takeover, boosted the club's profitability. United also received increased revenue from TV rights and expanded Old Trafford's capacity. In the same month as the AIG deal, Malcolm Glazer had 2 strokes, and his 6 children, Avram, Joel, Brian, Kevin, Darcy and Edward, ran United. At the time the Glazers bought the club, United had not won the Premier League for 2 years, but would soon become the dominant force in English and European football again. Under Alex Ferguson, United won a further 5 Premier League titles, the Champions League, 3 League Cups, and the Club World Cup. In January 2010, Man United's debt had grown to £716.5 million. To deal with it, the Glazer family decided to refinance and to borrow money in a different way. They sold bonds, a kind of loan investors can buy. They raised £504 million, which allowed them to pay off most of the £509 million they owed to international banks. However, the new bonds had high interest rates, meaning they had to pay £45 million in interest every year. The full amount of these bonds was due to be repaid in 2017. In short, they swapped bank debt for bond debt, which cost them a lot of annual interest. The bonds gave the Glazers the ability to take large amount of cash out of Man United. This included a potential £95 million cash withdrawal and half of the club's annual profits. In late 2010, they paid off a £220 million loan called PIK loan, which is a type of loan where the borrower can choose to pay the interest by adding it to the loan balance rather than paying it in cash. This means the loan amount grows over time, as unpaid interest gets added to the principal. But they didn't explain where they got the money, sparking rumours of possible extra loans or asset sales. Fans were unhappy and protested at the stadium. In 2011, there were rumours that the Glazers wanted to sell shares in Asia to raise £400 to £600 million, with Singapore as a likely place. Although they got approved, they later decided to go public on the New York Stock Exchange in 2012 to raise $100 million. They ended up selling 16.7 million shares, which is about 10% of the club. But as you can imagine, most of the money went to the Glazers instead of reducing the club's debt. The shares they sold had limited voting rights too, so the Glazers kept control over the club. The initial public offering happened in August 2012 at $14 per share, valuing Manchester United at $2.3 billion. Big investors bought shares, and by November, the club's debt had dropped to about £359 million. In 2014, Baron Capital bought a 24% stake of the New York Stock Exchange shares. When Malcolm Glazer passed away in 2014, the family continued running the club and kept taking annual dividend payments of around £20 million from 2016 to 2020. Man United became the only Premier League club to regularly pay dividends like this to their owners. The news of Sir Alex Ferguson's retirement in 2013 sent shockwaves through the football world. United's success on the pitch had continued right up until Ferguson's departure, with the club sealing their 20th league title. Ferguson famously asked fans to stand by our new manager in his farewell speech at Old Trafford, reminding supporters of the patience he was afforded in bad times. Since then, United have had 5 permanent managers and 2 chief executives. They've spent way over 1.5 billion on transfers and millions on managers, with still no Premier League title to show for it in the post-Fergie era. Their league positions have been inconsistent. They finished 8th in the 2023-24 season, the club's worst position since the 1989-90 season, whilst ending up with a negative goal difference. United went 6 years without a piece of silverware, their longest drought in 4 decades, before Ten Hag secured the Carabao Cup in the 22-23 season and the FA Cup in the 23-24 season, adding to an FA Cup won under Louis van Gaal in 2016, and a Europa League and League Cup double under Jose Mourinho a year later. When Ferguson retired, the club also lost experienced CEO David Gill, and Glazer replaced him with commercial director Ed Woodward. Woodward, an accountant and investment banker by trade, played a pivotal role in facilitating the Glazers' 2005 takeover, which saw him rewarded with a job at the club. Woodward had been responsible for hiring and firing multiple managers and dealing with transfers. During the same period, their net spend was higher than any other club in the world. Under Woodward's watch, and with the Glazers' backing, United have often provided the required funds, but not to be confused with the required players to be competitive. However, their scattergun approach in the transfer market and an incoherent structure within the club are key factors many people feel have contributed to their on-pitch demise. It was Woodward who oversaw the disaster that was David Moyes' first and last time at United, as the Scot had asked for the signing of Gareth Bale and Cesc Fabregas, statement signings the manager needed to help bolster an aging squad coming off a title win. However, Moyes was left with the signing of Fellaini on deadline day. Woodward and United were now a laughingstock in the world of football and when dealing with transfers. Ferguson's successor lost the confidence of the players, and the club finished the season without European football for the first time since 1980 in the 2013-14 season. Moyes was let go 50 games into a 6-year contract. Many would say he was the wrong appointment in the first place. Even Gary Neville spoke out about the sacking, saying, to give a manager a 6-year deal, whether it was right or wrong, and sack him after 8 months, to me that signalled the start of a new period of reactive leadership. And indeed he was right. There was a clear shift in focus. United's commercial revenue increased from £44 million in 2005 to over £300 million in 2023. The club now has worldwide sponsors for pretty much everything, ranging from tyres to skincare to pillows, while annual pre-season tours around the globe have strengthened those relationships. The Glazers' approach has always been not to treat Man United as a football club, but as an aspirational brand that people want to be associated with, says football finance expert Kieran Maguire. In 2014, United signed a record-breaking £750 million 10-year kit deal with Adidas, and extended that partnership in 2023 with a £900 million contract, the biggest in Premier League history. And United have extended their original 3-year shirt sponsor deal for another 2 years to run through 2029 with US-based company Qualcomm, which is further proof of the club's commercial appeal. As Woodward himself pointed out during a conference call with stakeholders in 2018, playing performance doesn't really have a meaningful impact on what he can do on the commercial side of the business. I mean, it was an honest statement, but one that also suggested how United's priorities had shifted during Glazer's and Woodward's tenure. Yet, whilst making all these record-breaking deals, the club is still in debt. Following David Moyes, United would go on to have 4 further permanent managers. Van Gaal replacing Moyes as manager. He was also very much aware of the club's commercial focus over performance on the pitch, stating before he arrived that maybe United is too big a club, not only in sporting sense but also commercially. In the years under Van Gaal, Mourinho, Ole and Ten Hag, United would spend way over £1 billion in transfers on players like Angel Di Maria, who signed for £59.7 million as a British record transfer, then left for PSG after 1 season for £44.3 million, less than what they had paid for him. Early signs of bad recruitment strategy from the club. Winning the FA Cup was not enough to save Van Gaal. Woodward sacked him on the same day they celebrated at Wembley. Jose Mourinho spent over £350 million on new signings, but failed to live up to the expectations during his 2.5 years at Man United. Woodward went on to give players lucrative wages, like sanctioning a $500k per week contract for Alexis Sanchez, who ultimately didn't work out. and broke the world record transfer fee for bringing back Paul Pogba for £89 million, who then later let his contract run down and was let go for free. Just a few of the poor recruitment decisions financially. Mourinho ultimately fell out with Woodward. The decision to sign Victor Lindelof over Virgil van Dijk as a cost-cutting measure was just the beginning. They also argued over Anthony Martial's future in the final summer, with Mourinho wanting to sell players who he thought weren't right for United, though player power was becoming a lot more apparent in the squad, which never was allowed to happen under Alex Ferguson. Mourinho was ultimately sacked, costing the club £14 million. What was apparent is United were clearly lacking an identity and a footballing structure above the manager to create an effective recruitment strategy, often not getting their intended top target and overpaying for players, whilst giving them high wages who you could say were bought for more commercial appeal, who then became difficult to sell when they didn't work out. The Glazer family would go on to share around £18 million of the £23 million dividend payment in 2019, 2 years after they had already made £56 million by selling more shares. Whilst they have recently stopped receiving dividends, the damages have already been done.
European Super League, which poses an existential threat.
But I'm disgusted, absolutely disgusted.
The greed and arrogance.
The owners of these teams have displayed the worst kind of greed.
In April 2021, the Glazers' plans to join a breakaway European Super League showed just how disconnected they were from the English football culture. 1 month after Avram Glazer put £70 million worth of shares up for sale, United became a driving force behind the Super League, with 11 other leading clubs from England, Spain and Italy, where the founder members would be exempt from relegation. Joel Glazer, a main advocate, apologised to the fans saying, "We got it wrong," though his brother Avram remained silent. Gary Neville even called the owners scavengers for their lack of understanding of the club's legacy. The backlash was swift. United fans stormed the Carrington training ground to protest, and a week later disrupted a game against Liverpool at Old Trafford, in a historic protest that led to the game's postponement. The fallout continued as Woodward resigned following the backlash. By early 2020, he had left the club. After the Super League disaster, the Glazers tried to win back United fans by bringing Cristiano Ronaldo back to Old Trafford. This move drew comparisons to their signing of NFL star Tom Brady for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, with many viewing it as another commercial ploy and a player brought in with higher wages around $500k per week. But for most United fans, Ronaldo's return was a dream come true, reigniting hope that United could challenge for the title. The hype was short-lived, and in 2022 Ronaldo made headlines after an interview with Piers Morgan on Talk TV, calling out the Glazers, saying he felt betrayed by the club and that the owners don't care about the club, saying Manchester United are a marketing club and that it will be hard for Manchester to be top of the game in the next 2 or 3 years. He even went on to mention how the training facilities were still the same as when he first left back in 2009, an insight into the lack of investment in infrastructure from the owners. Further examples were the leaking roof at Old Trafford, a stadium rusting away, just like the United identity. The Glazers finally put the club up for sale on the 22nd of November, the same day the club announced it had terminated Ronaldo's contract. It emerged that interested parties included Sir Jim Ratcliffe, owner of Ineos, and Sheikh Jassim, the son of the former Qatar Prime Minister, who wanted to own 100% of United and was willing to clear the club's existing debt and spend $1.4 billion on infrastructure and transfers. The possibilities under a Qatari regime seemed limitless. Having previously made a world record bid, Sheikh Jassim made a final take it or leave it offer in June 2023, widely suggested to be more than £5 billion, but still below the Glazers' asking price. Radcliffe's proposal valued United at a higher price, but was not for the whole club and would give the Glazers the chance to stay. After Qatar pulled out the sale, it paved the way for Radcliffe to pay more than $1.25 billion for a 27.7% minority stake in United, the first step in what many will hope will be a full takeover that will eventually get rid of the Glazers. Although this is only a minority stake, Radcliffe now has charge of the football operations, leading to many changes in the leadership team, including a new chief executive Omar Barada, who has moved from rivals Manchester City. Closer to the pitch, Dan Ashworth has been snapped up from Newcastle United as sporting director, while Jason Wilcox has been brought in from Southampton as technical director. Ten Hag has been replaced by Sporting Lisbon manager Ruben Amorim. Could this finally be the step in the right direction for United after more than a decade of mismanagement under the Glazers?